Hey guys, I'm Kat. I just wanted to take a few minutes here to make this video just to let you know a little bit about myself and about my journey. Basically, since the age of about 7 to 7.5, I've known that I was bisexual. I didn't know probably until high school, if not after high school, what the word for that actually was. All I knew was that I got this funny feeling around boys and girls. And as I grew, I started to figure out, wait a second, this is a funny feeling that I should only really be getting around boys. I didn't really know what to do with it, but I did the only thing that, growing up in a Christian household, I knew to do was something that I didn't want. I didn't talk about it, I hid it, and I prayed that God would take it away. Now, obviously, for those of you out there that are watching this that have been down that path, you know it didn't happen like that. It didn't go away. Up through junior high school, when I started really developing crushes on females and males, it seemed to intensify. And it seemed to intensify even worse in high school when my family moved me out of the public school system into an all-girls Catholic school. Just as a side note, if you really want to mess with somebody who's bisexual, put them in a gender-segregated school. It was an interesting experience. But the feelings intensified as I grew, as I matured, as I hit puberty, obviously, and continued on, and it became clear it was not going away. Now, as with so many other GLBT youth, this was heartbreaking for me. I spent countless nights in tears, and I'm not going to lie, there were 2 different times in my life in which I did attempt to take my life because of this. Because I felt that what was going on with me was so out of my control and so something that I did not want, that I could not stand to live like that for the rest of my life. Sadly, the feelings intensified in college. I ended up at a Christian college studying to be a pastor, which is something that I knew I wanted to do from the age of about 15. And at the point when I began to go to college, I didn't really know that the Christian community as a whole really said anything about people like me, really said anything about people who felt funny feelings toward people that happened to be the same gender as them. And I was in for a really rude awakening when I got to college and sat in a chapel service only to hear that apparently we're abominations. Apparently we're sinners, which, I mean, we were anyway, but apparently the attraction is sinful. Apparently God hates us. Apparently we're going to burn in hell. And I hadn't known any of these things before going to college. This was a horrendous, horrendous wake-up call for me. And rather than doing what I should have done, rather than immediately saying, this doesn't make sense, I know I'm a Christian, I know I love God with all my heart and want to serve Him and want to spend my life being a pastor, I said, you know what? The feelings that I've had all my life that this is wrong are apparently right. Apparently even God says that it's not just me. So I did what the only logical thing to do was, which is got involved with an ex-gay ministry, which spent the next year trying to change my sexual orientation. Those of you that have been involved with that sort of thing know all too well it didn't work. It never works. There are people that try to repress their sexuality. There are people that change their behavior, but the fact of the matter is, I was still every bit as attracted to both women and men as I ever had been. So at that point I just decided, well, you know, I've tried to take my life twice. I couldn't even do that right. I've tried to change this since the age of 7. At that point, I was 18. Obviously, something's got to give, but I'm just going to have to deal with this the rest of my life. So I kind of resigned myself to that and went about the rest of college pretty much sliding under the radar. And stayed under the radar for the most part until shortly after I got married. It was just after my senior year in college that I ended up thankfully marrying my best friend, and he was of like mind in terms of going into the ministry. He had actually been in the same denomination his entire life, grew up in it, and was on track to be ordained. And shortly after we got married, he actually got ordained. And it was shortly after that that the problem started, that things really kind of got different, because we ended up moving to take over a circuit of churches that he was going to be pastoring. And when we did so, God had a funny way of plopping us in a little courtyard surrounded by a lesbian couple and a male-to-female transsexual. Now, at this point in our lives, we were both kind of the feeling, well, you know, we're taught that we can be nice to these people, we can be cool with these people, but, you know, what they're doing is not so good. Long story short, we came to talk to them and came to be friends with them, and the male-to-female transsexual asked us a few weeks later if she could go to church with us, which of course we told her by all means, you're of course welcome. Well, for those of you that are in Christian churches that are less than affirming of the GLBT community, you probably know how that went. Long story short, that ended up leading to our decision to leave that denomination. Shortly thereafter, we decided that God was calling us to start a church in Colton, California that was welcoming of all his children. It didn't matter what their gender identity was, didn't matter what their sexual orientation, their race, their gender, none of that. And God really blessed that for a while. We weren't able to stay there tremendously long because of finances, and eventually we ended up moving back here where we are now to North Carolina, where my husband grew up. Since we did that, we have had the pleasure of working with several different congregations of GLBT individuals and allies. And I've come to really understand something. As I've sat here and watched videos these last few months and seen commercials these last few months of all of these people telling kids in the GLBT community it gets better, I sit there and shake my head thinking something's missing. Yes, it does get better. And no, it can't get better if you give up. It can't get better if you take your own life. It can't get better if you decide to end it, because that makes the other people win. That makes bigotry win out. That makes prejudice win out. At the same time, it doesn't just get better because you stay alive. It doesn't just get better because you wake up tomorrow. It gets better because of the kinds of things that I have had the absolute honor to be able to be involved in. Things like churches in the buckle of the Bible Belt in the South that are welcoming of all God's kids. Things like an alliance of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, intersex, and straight allies in Hope Mills, North Carolina this weekend, of all places. Things like local kids wanting to start GSAs in their schools. Things like families getting together and starting PFLAG. It does get better, but it doesn't just get better on its own. It gets better because we work together. And it gets better because we work together with allies that may not seem to be a part of us, but really are a part of us. I want to encourage you guys that are watching, you guys that feel like nothing's ever going to get better, that feel like we're never going to see a day where same-sex couples are given the exact same rights as opposite-sex couples, that's the worst lie we can tell ourselves. The worst lie we can tell ourselves is that it's never going to be better, that we're never going to be equal. Because if we believe that, it's going to be true. If we don't believe that, it does get better. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. Please know there are people out there that love you. There are people out there that accept you. There are people in churches. There are people in schools. There are people in community centers. Please reach out if you're hurting. Reach out if you need somebody. We're stronger together and we're better together.